I'm Jonna Till Johnson, CEO of Nemertes, here with my co-host,
John Burke, CTO of Nemertes.
And today we're going to be talking about Nth-Party risk here on Heavy Strategy, which is the show that tries to ask the right questions, not give the right answers. John, what do you mean when you say Nth-Party risk?
Well, I'm glad you asked, Jonna. So everybody's talking a lot right now about third-party risk, so it probably actually pays a little benefit to back up a step and say, what do you mean third party? What about first and second? So first party risk is the insider threat, the risk that an organization faces based on its own employees, its own staff, its own stuff. Second party risk is classically the risk that is presented to us by our customers and clients, so the people we serve. I frankly have a little bit of a logical issue with distinguishing between second-party risk and third-party risk, which is the risk to us from the people we buy stuff from, our vendors, our service providers, our SaaS platforms, our partners even. And then after that, fourth-party risk is strictly the risk to our suppliers, fifth-party risk, the risk to their suppliers, or the risk from their suppliers, and so on, ad infinitum, nth party risk. And so I think it's probably good to be talking about this right now. I'm keeping in mind, foremost, all of the problems that have been accruing to Salesforce customers in the last 6 months or so. I think starting back in maybe May, we started to see that, I think in May it was Adidas, most recently it was Google. Their Salesforce instances were being compromised and data was being stolen from Salesforce that belonged to these clients of Salesforce. And so if I'm doing business with Google and Google's doing business with Salesforce and Salesforce gets robbed, that's fourth party risk for me. And if somebody supplying services to Salesforce had gotten robbed, that'd be the fifth or the nth party, however far you want to take the numbers out. But it's clearly becoming more of an issue. So that Salesforce stuff put that top of mind for me recently. And then also I'm going to go ahead and call it hype, the incredible hype I'm seeing about MCP right now, the Model Control Protocol, which is a way for AI agents to get work out of other AI agents, essentially, a protocol for asking for something to be done, sending a prompt, and getting the results back. And it seems to me that you're just adding the possibility of automated, invisible, nth-party risk to your AI environment when you start to incorporate MCP into it.
Okay, that's kind of a lot to unpack, but I'll try. The first one is, just to be clear, you're sort of delineating insider threat is first party risk, second party risk is customers and clients, third party is supplier, and fourth party is their suppliers. But what about their customers and clients, and what about their insider risk? Is that
exactly?
It would seem
it should be classified in the same kind of way, or like third party risk once removed or something like that. But
yeah, right.
The taxonomy kind of falls apart at that point.
Okay. And the other thing is, I don't know about you, but I always call this supply chain risk. What's different?
It is supply chain risk in a way. Most people tend to focus their supply chain risk thinking on their immediate suppliers and the primary suppliers of those suppliers, if they're robust in their supply chain thinking. And if they're really robust in their supply chain thinking, they go layers beyond that. But they're not often used to thinking about that in their IT contexts, and especially not in their software context as opposed to their hardware contexts.
Well, I'm going to push back on that because, first of all, pretty much everybody who's looking at, supply chain risks, if they're in IT, they think about, okay, who makes the chips that are in my routers, or who makes the modules that are in my software, which is where we get SBOM, software bill of materials. So I think it sounds like fourth party risk is just a fancy way of saying, supply chain risk.
Sure. I don't have any argument with that. I still think, though, that the main point is people aren't thinking about it enough. They're not thinking far enough out in their supply chains, and they're not thinking about dynamic supply chains, where the suppliers can change on a minute-by-minute basis.
Yeah, I will give you, and leaving aside the AI agents, which we'll come back to, I will give you the second for sure. But pretty much most IT people that I talk to have thought about the question, ever since the super micro bug, which everybody says really wasn't, but it was because the bug was actually replicated by researchers, independent researchers. Everybody's been thinking about what happens if somebody puts a bug in a chip in a router kind of thing. I, I don't know too many people who don't think that way. Maybe we hang out in different circles in IT, but most
I
of
think
my
you
IT
have a
friends.
slightly more paranoid circle, but yes.
Well, I would prefer to think of it as more sophisticated, but I'll take it, John. I'll take
I will
paranoid.
grant more realistic because this
But
is
yes.
the state of the world right now.
But the very concept of supply chain bill of materials, or software bill of materials, SBOM, indicates that somebody somewhere thought about it enough to come up with a cutesy name for it. So I would say people do think about it, but I agree with you that on the point that nobody really thinks hard enough about how dynamic it can be, because the real issue here is not that there's a static list like I trust John and I will always forever trust John, and the bad guys haven't corrupted him because reasons. No. I mean, your software can have been updated with a patch or a change or a new feature, and that feature can be bringing in all sorts of vulnerabilities. So the idea that something can be once and done trusted is bonkers.
Absolutely. And the idea that an annual audit is going to capture the supply chain as it exists for your company is also kind of bonkers because supply
Right.
chains are in flux constantly.
Right.
And the further you stretch that network out, the more flexible and the more changeable it has to be because it is that much bigger. It's encompassing that much more of the global economy.
Well, and I think there's also a bigger issue here, or perhaps we can say this is a special case of a broader issue, which is that most IT folks don't truly know what they have in their IT or OT environments. So they have no idea what they have. They have no idea what current configuration it has, have no idea how that compares to the most current configuration and any patches and updates that have been applied to keep things safe. And now we're asking them to worry about everybody else's environments too. So, yeah.
Uh-huh. I wouldn't go so far as to say they don't know anything that's in their environments, but they don't know everything that's there in their environments. And most of them, I think, appreciate the fact that they don't have complete knowledge, even if they can't figure out exactly what to do about it.
Well, and that's why there's companies out there that specialize in doing, asset management for various ranges. But at some point, asset management, the problem, the other problem I think you're sort of touching on, John, is it's not just a question of being unfamiliar with assets in your IT environment. It's one thing to say, hey, I know my mainframe and I know what version it is, and I know, exactly what code's running on it. It's totally different when everything in your building has a microprocessor and an internet link.
Right.
You probably don't even know what's in your building like even in your house, you probably have appliances that have microprocessors and internet links, and you have no idea what the configuration state is and what in some of those cases, they're actually hard-coded passwords, which still blows my mind.
Hard-coded and stupid passwords at that.
Yeah. That said, the risk of somebody breaking into my house and washing my dishes is pretty much zero.
If people want to monitor how much dishwashing I do, which I think all that dishwasher could report if it had a network connection, okay, I guess I can live with that. There's not a lot to infer from that, except I could do the dishes a little more often.
Well,
anyway,
and I would certainly like it to tell me how to configure this stupid dishwasher, because it's German and it talks back to me, but that's neither here nor there.
Does it talk to you in German?
No, but it just has a really bewildering series of beeps when I'm not pushing the right buttons, which the fad now is not to make buttons look like buttons. So you sort of have to randomly poke at the control panel and hope that you're hitting a button. But,
that's why God gave us Sharpies.
There you go. Coming back to this, though, I think, nth-party risk is kind of a fancy way of talking about supply chain risk, but I think it does put what I like about it, and what I liked about this topic is that it puts it in context. In other words, people pay an inordinate amount of attention to, say, insider threat. Every bank, most high-tech firms are very, very concerned about what could happen with insider threat. And yet at the same time, the possibility of a bug on a chip on a box is like poo-pooed as something too sci-fi to worry about.
Once upon
At
a
least in
time,
your group.
it was, and
Right.
it way, 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 way lower on the risk level than having somebody inside decide to do something unethical or be leaned on to do something unethical or just accidentally do something unethical. All kinds of insider threat there. Still a problem. But I agree, there should be more focus on it. And I'll take one half step back and say supply chain risk doesn't tend to extend past you to the people you supply. So that second party risk idea does kind of fade out for supply chain risk, one way in which they differ.
Possibly, although it depends on who who you are. Are you the customer or are you the supplier? Well, both, but yes.
But if I'm selling you something, supply chain risk doesn't ask me to consider the risk represented by you, my customer.
That is true. That's actually true, although I'm not sure how important it is, but it's definitely true. So,
and it's a good thought. People compromising customer portals is a significant threat in some organizations. So something to keep in mind. Anyway, digressing. Back to where we were. I fear that where we've talked ourselves around to is sort of a boil the ocean 100% S-bomb that runs out to the very utter edges of all my suppliers at whatever point I decide to take the snapshot, assuming a robust protocol-based real-time S-bomb mechanism existed, which it doesn't yet, and that everybody was using it, which they don't.
I'm going to push back on the existed. Now, I truly do not know the limits of scalability here, but in my mind, that has been the one and only reason for blockchain to exist, is that it does, in fact, capture irrefutably transactions that have been made, such as software updates. So if you have the question...
I'm not saying it couldn't. I'm just saying it's not done yet. It doesn't exist yet.
I don't know that it isn't done. I don't think it's widely done. I know folks are using it certainly to provide internal system integration, and partly for exactly that reason, to find out what happens when one system A changes system B inside the environment. What we haven't seen is a widespread network of deploying it outside. And I know there are folks trying to do that, and particularly given the topic that you just brought up briefly and I put on the shelf, I'm going to take it back down, which is agentic AI. I think blockchain would be a tremendously useful tool to use to track the actions of agentic AI. And I think companies should be looking at forming some sort of coalition or something to get blockchain into widespread use, so that if AI A asks AI B for something, you can actually prove that transaction occurred and who provided that flawed whatever it was. Whether that's stolen intellectual property or, dangerously wrong data, at least you know the source. And
standardized, protocol-based, certifiable, auditable, all of that. Beautiful thought. It isn't there.
Yes. No, but it is.
And it's not going to be there next year. And it's not going to be there the year after that. It'll take time to propagate, even if people can arrive at a standard that enough folks can live with to get critical mass to make it happen. So, all of that's a great idea. But when you say arrive at a standard, some of that's been developed. So I don't think it's quite as difficult. It's just a matter of people saying, all right, let's use it. Let's check it out. Let's see which version of blockchain we want to use. And, rough consensus and running code. It didn't take that long to build the internet and develop TCP/IP. Yes, we're still refining pieces of it, but those are nth order refinements. I don't know. I think I spent 10 years working through the stuff that came before IP and TCP as
but I'm not talking about that.
Enterprise networks and then getting to TCP and IP consistently.
But
I can't see it going faster.
Well, the IETF itself was going much faster. That's rough consensus and running code is the IETF's motto. So it is possible to move very quickly and have people jump onto the bandwagon. In fact, the entire AI hype fest is less than 2 years old. And AI has gone from being absolutely nowhere to being ubiquitous in every tool we use. So I don't think it's impossible at all for something to take off that quickly. The real issue is the only reasons that something will take off that quickly are like a combined carrot and stick. There has to be a huge, juicy carrot that something's going to be great if you do deploy AI or the internet or whatever it is. And then there's got to be an enormous stick, which is mostly FOMO, fear of missing out. If I don't do it, I'm going to be locked out of the next generation ecosystem and I won't make any money and my company will go belly up. And I think the problem here is that there isn't a carrot and there isn't a stick for solving, let's refer to it as nth-party risk, because I do like that term. So if there's no carrot, no stick, like, will there ever be? I mean, that's the real question, John. I'm asking, do you think anyone's ever going to care? I mean, if, for heaven's sakes, if the Microsoft crash of 2 years ago hadn't caused people to say, oh, maybe we should start thinking about, third-party risk, I don't know what will.
Exactly. And I don't see anything happening without basically both the EU governments and the United States government getting behind the equivalent of the aborted U.S. government push for S-bombs under the Biden administration.
No.
Something
John,
like that to get folks to adopt this protocol that you're talking about, adopt this blockchain-based methodology. If they want to do business with the EU government, if they want to do business with the US government, when the government was requiring companies to have S-bombs in order to sell things to the government, which is a huge buyer of stuff, then it actually started to happen. When the government leans back away from that, it stops happening so much. I mean, I don't see the carrot. It's a combination of carrot and stick, economically speaking.
No, you're just riding roughshod over my point, which is people only do something when there's a juicy carrot or a fierce stick. And
so that's the carrot and the stick.
A government mandate is not a carrot
not
or
a mandate
stick.
for everybody, a mandate for people who want to sell things to the government.
Everybody
wants to sell things to the government, so it's a big juicy carrot. And if you're already selling something to the government and you want to keep that contract, it's a stick.
Honestly, John, your faith in government top-down imposition is stunning.
It's the government as a business setting the conditions under which it will buy services and goods. It's not imposing regulations on people who are trying to do business with each other, only on the people who are trying to do business with them. And once they're all complying with that, they can use it with each other if they want, and they'll probably see some benefit in it because they've already sunk the investment.
But John, come up with your government mandate example that is analog to the internet or to AI. The government didn't mandate the internet. The government didn't mandate AI. And those were some of the two strongest technology waves that we've had in the past, 50 years. I don't that's the kind of thing we'd have to see. I don't see how the government saying, hey, everybody, get your nth-party risk on blockchain is even a fraction of the energy of those two.
I don't think it has to be, but you saw how fiercely Amazon, Microsoft, and Google fought to get the giant government cloud contract that was issued, I think, last year. If one of the requirements of that had been robust nth-party risk management for the cloud provider in question, it would have put considerable incentive in front of those three cloud providers to implement something that met government requirements. And of course, if the government was smart, they wouldn't require it to be complete initially, but to be rolling out steadily from layer to layer over the course of the contract.
Yeah, the whole thing just smells like an academic exercise. I mean, what I'm really trying to get at here is I don't see how a government mandate. Yes, I've heard what you've said. The government is a buyer. The U.S. government, that is a big buyer. The EU governments are big buyers. But that's not the real issue here. The real issue is how serious a problem is this, and at what point are people, governments, businesses, whatever, going to take it seriously? And if the possibility of planes falling out of the sky and hospitals not being able to function isn't scary enough, I'm completely convinced that government mandate won't work, nor is there anything like the groundswell that we've seen behind the internet or, the AI uptake.
I mean, it's possible they would want to leave 5 or 10 billion bucks laying on the table because they didn't want to start taking steps that they already knew they should take from the perspective of their own risk management internally. But okay, sure.
Yeah, you seem to be defending this idea of a government mandate as though there are
you keep saying government
of,
mandate like
it's a government mandate. Yes.
No, it's not like the government mandate on Joe Random walking down the street doing business with Jane Random walking down the street. It's a buying criterion. It's a checklist item on their purchase orders.
But
like, does the product in question meet this requirement? And you can do it for mil spec, day, night, and midday, and crepuscular periods in between. Why can't you do it for this? Why can't this kind of thing be the equivalent of meeting military specifications for selling something to the military?
Because the examples you're giving are cases where the problem is largely solved. The fix is in. What this takes is a lot of people taking that rough consensus and running code and beating it into something that's functional and widely adopted. Because if it's not widely adopted, it's not very important. Mm-hmm. And so if it's something that people just adopt to do business with the government, at some point, I could spend $5 million trying to adopt this new thing to get that $4 million of business with the government, or I could just say, government's not worth selling to, which is very likely what's going to happen in a scenario where the practical problem is huge because it's the practical uptake and governance and everything else about it that hasn't been solved yet, even if the existing technology is there. So that's...
Oh, but you just told me the existing technology was there, Jonna.
I did. And I said... And
so that's a problem they don't have to solve.
But I just said, if you listen back to what I just said, I said the governance and practical building out of the technology, which can be done and has been done in short periods of time, but only in scenarios where there's a real benefit. And where you and I are butting heads is you claim that doing a couple $1 million of business with the government is a big enough benefit to justify making this investment. And my point is, no, that's nothing like what, say, LL Bean in the 1990s had to face, an existential threat by the internet to its catalog business, right? Oh my God, we better put up a website on this internet thing because otherwise we won't be able to survive. And in fact, at this point, LL Bean is an online business that also happens to produce a catalog for old fuddy-duddies who still need one. So, I mean, it's just completely different to imply that the handful of companies that care about doing business with the U.S. government are going to make the same level of investment because of that, existentially companies made during the internet boom and have made during the AI boom. That just stuns me that you would compare those two. So in any event,
welcome to be stunned, but I'm looking for ways.
Not the same.
I'm looking for ways for these economic incentives you're talking about to be applied. I know you're not a big fan of regulatory sticks, so that's it. That's what's out there.
Well, that's not really what I'm asking. I'm asking the question, is there something other than government requirements to do business that could generate the level of energy in companies to actually do this? And I'm actually thinking that the rise of agentic AI might be that thing, because the thing that you put on the shelf, I put on the shelf that you brought up, that, this whole notion of, hey, agentic AI is actually a form of Nth-Party risk, and you probably want to have insight into it and auditability and all those other things. If everybody's going to go out there and adopt agentic AI, I don't believe they can do it without some form of automated protocol and automated auditable protocol to track Nth-Party risk. And at that point, the rise of agentic AI, if it occurs, could be big enough to drive people to really start putting their heads together on this.
It's possible if they set the requirements, if they stick to those requirements in the face of pressure from their business units to relax them in order to do things faster with MCP connected agents that don't meet the auditability requirements or what have you. It's possible that some of the energy could come in there It would be something that companies were undertaking without a clear financial incentive to put those requirements in place. So it would have to be coming from, I don't know, insurance companies or somebody to say, you got to do this stuff if you want us to give you insurance of your business at all. Maybe not even cyber insurance, John, just like business insurance.
Hold on, back up a second. Both the internet, my two examples, both the internet and the AI boom did not actually deliver clear ROI. I was in the business of trying to create ROIs for companies and during the .com boom, and finally just had to throw up my hands and say, guys, this is just the direction everything's going. It's the zeitgeist. There isn't a clear ROI for it. But you're still going to have to be part of the internet at some pace, so you can't just ignore it. And it's the same thing that's happened with AI. I think there was a paper that came out recently that said that 97% of AI projects have no clear value, business value. I don't know how true that research is, but based on what I've seen,
I would not be surprised.
Right. So when you say there has to be some sort of forcing function, you keep falling back on the government says you need to do it to do business, or insurance agencies say.
Nope.
That's what you said.
Not for the use of MCP and networks of agentic AI, for the imposition of rational risk management on those things by businesses whose main motivation right now is speed to market, whatever market they perceive themselves to be speeding towards, that they think all this agentic AI stuff is going to help them get to. There's nothing that I've heard so far that suggests they're going to do it responsibly. It's like, I'm going to build my sweatshop, a factory for producing shirts, and I'm not going to put fire alarms, fire escapes, or, a sprinkler system into those buildings. That's expensive and it's a future risk. I don't want to worry about it right now.
I think you're right. So there you go. I'm not going to argue with you on that point.
Everybody take a note.
Yeah. But I think I've been staring off into space because I've been thinking about this. And I think part of the problem is you're positioning this, and I don't think it's wrong to position it this way, but I think it's lacking, as sort of risk management, doing things responsibly. And you're absolutely correct. No company ever in the history of companies has had a long-term trajectory of doing things right and responsibly just to do that, because they always get steamrolled by the guys who don't. That's the nature of capitalism. So, companies may start that way and then they end up cutting corners, because if they don't, they get steamrolled. But I am wondering how much of this is really a do it right versus do it at all kind of discussion, because I'm not sure what value agentic AI has if you can't guarantee that that the transactions that you claim have happened have actually happened at some point. You can make up answers to stuff, which is kind of where we are now, which is great as long as you don't really care what the answers are and it doesn't really matter if they're wrong. But if you're using AI for anything that actually matters, you're going to need some degree of accountability and auditability to at least be able to say, well, we did our best to get the most accurate information possible. Same thing. It's the classic scenario. Somebody's using agentic AI to plan a vacation and discovers that the AI has gone ahead and set up hotel rooms in hotels that don't exist. That's just not going to be a viable business. It just ain't.
It depends on the percentage of times it fails. Because what we've seen is that AI has gotten more and more popular despite consistently, persistently, irredeemably being wrong about all sorts of things all the time,
that is
every
true,
day.
But I would argue that for a business like vacation planning, a very small percent of the time is still bad enough. You can't arrive in a strange country where you don't speak the language at 2 a.m. and find that there's no hotel and you have no idea where to stay. That happens once, and you will never, ever, 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 ever buy that service again. And you will tell all your friends not to buy it. So that's very different from buying the big Bible of mushrooms that tells you to check to see whether a mushroom is poisonous by tasting it, which actually does exist. Yeah, you've heard me talk about that, right, John?
Yeah, I'm just reminded of the existence of the Center for Non-Destructive Evaluation.
Yeah. Well, it depends on who you're trying to destruct.
Uh-huh.
It's one thing to worry about the destruction to the mushrooms, and then there's the question of the destruction to the actual person taking the bite. But I digress. Although, a side note, Vlad was able to find a giant bushel full of honey mushrooms that are
Ooh,
delicious.
yeah.
Yes, and they're now boiled up and in our freezer for future use.
Nice.
So anyhow, since I know you are, what's the word for people that like mushrooms?
Mycophile, I think.
Mycophile, yes, that's it. So anyway, coming back to it, I do think that the businesses that people are trying to construct on top of agentic AI actually will fail unless there is auditability to a very great degree, much more so than, if you're just talking about gathering information that could be incorrect.
Sure. And if you're talking about doing things, things actually getting done is a pretty strong requirement for the continued existence of the entity. But if your worries are about not so much accuracy as confidentiality, how do you do anything to, audit the confidentiality provisions of the people that you're doing business with at 6 removes through a chain of AI agents? There's room for a protocol here to make a difference, and there's room for it to make a commercial difference if there are, the equivalent of the good housekeeping or United Labs seal of approval. It's like, yep,
Well,
we've used this one because it's shown itself to be reliable, but they need something to look at the nth party risk in order to make that assessment.
Well, and on that note, I've proposed blockchain as that protocol. I'm not wedded to it. If anyone's listened this far and has an opinion, please let us know. Just follow up by sending something to packetpushers.net/FU for follow up. Let us know what you think, whether blockchain would be a good protocol for addressing nth party risk and whether or not it would be helpful for agentic AI. I guess we agree on a couple of things, John, and
Totally.
we don't have to agree on everything. That's the whole purpose of this show. So, John, if folks want to find you online, where should they go?
Right now, still LinkedIn. If you search John Burke Nemertes, that's me, and the Nemertes Substack increasingly.
Exactly. Thank you much. Thank you for handing that over to me, because I was just about to say, please check out nemertes.substack.com. That's where we're alive and bouncing around and posting lots of things, and you can reach us all there. So definitely check us out on Substack, nemertes.substack.com, and send us a note. Thanks for listening.